everybody. Welcome. Welcome back to another episode of Cinemacast. Right here on YouTube and on Rumble. Here it is, July, everybody. July. And got a special one for you. Oh, yeah. This one you're probably a little eccentric or excited to hear about or to see. Hell, I even wanted to see this movie myself. Today's feature is 28 years later. The third in the series, which is a trilogy right now, and is once again directed by director Danny Boyle, who directed the first two movies of the series, 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks. So this is not quite like the last two. Not quite like the last. So, if you go back a little bit to 28 Days, which is considered a post-apocalyptic horror film, and usually the basis behind these movies is about a virus that has been worked on and it ends up being released into the public, via test subjects, whether it be rats or monkeys or such, and it's considered or called a rage virus, basically. It's a rage virus. It's a highly contagious, aggression-inducing virus, as it's called, and it starts out, it causes the breakdown of society. And what it does when it passes from person to person or subject to subject, it just takes a matter of seconds for that subject to become infected and ends up very aggressive like. There is no sympathy, no moral, nothing with the subject. They're just a raving maniac, there's just nothing human about them anymore. Or even if it hits an animal, there's nothing animal about it anymore. And once again, going back to a movie like 28 Days Later, despite Danny Boyle not considering this a zombie film, and I know a lot of people look at these movies as like they're zombie movies, different types of zombies, different evolutions of zombies, and the zombie genre has been around since the 1960s. George A. Romero's first entry, Night of the Living Dead, which is a first of its kind and very controversial for its time, not just because of the graphic nature of the content, but also in one of the first horror movies one of the first horror movies of the 60s, or even one of the first movies of all time back in the 60s, to have a lead actor played by a black guy, a black actor. I forgot what his name was. So, yeah, but George Romero, he started the zombie genre, and it evolved greatly over the last, God, I want to say 6, 7, 8 decades. So yeah, just about, well, no, I won't say 8. I won't say 8. But you could definitely say about 50, 60 years since Night of the Living Dead. Zombie movies have greatly evolved. They've been terrifying for audiences all around. And of course, a movie like 28 Days Later, which sort of brought the realization to the public with movies like this, especially when you look at the fact. Excuse me. God, I think I'm coming down with something now. It was a rage virus. But you gotta think, movies like this, it brings the realization to light where all these different viruses that are being man-made in labs and experimented with for various reasons. You could create something that you may think could be the cure for cancer, could be the cure for AIDS, or something along the lines of within the last 5 years, say COVID-19, where viruses are man-made to be weaponized against public for political status or territorial gain and such. And when a virus like that came out, when it was released into the public, and there was all kind of pandemonium going on with every continent, every country. People were panicking. They were like, "Oh my God, there's a virus! It's killing people. What can they create next?" And then you got websites like the CDC that are talking about what to do in case of a zombie outbreak, and it's like, are they being for real? a zombie outbreak? Are they being actually for real? Like, people who have been watching these types of movies for the last 6, 7 decades are like, holy shit, this is something that can actually happen? And it just amazes me, especially like the realism of these movies that something like this could outbreak. It's not going to be like, you're not going to be walking around like, walkers from The Walking Dead or anything from George A. Romero's movies, but you could have something that could alter your DNA, alter your characteristics, your personality, whatever, and turn you into a raging maniac. And that's what these movies do, even though director Danny Boyle doesn't consider it a zombie film. But you got to look at 28 Days Later is credited with reinvigorating the genre and influencing a revival in it after a decade after it's released. And with its fast running, infected, and character driven drama. So, yeah, a movie like 28 Days Later was very well received. It was very well received. That movie's got an 87% consensus rate on RottenTomatoes.com. And then you look at its titular sequel, 28 Weeks Later, which came out at least 5 years after 28 Days Later, and is also considered a post-apocalyptic horror film. This time, it's starring Robert Carlyle in the main role, and of course, this movie, it's set after the events of the first one, depicting the efforts of the United States-led NATO forces to establish a safe zone in London. So all these movies are based around in Europe. There's really nothing based or going on in the United States or anywhere else. It's all European. It's all in London, UK, and such. And of course, I believe, if I remember correctly, one of the bases for 28 Weeks Later is in fact about a mother who is a carrier of the virus. And I think her son is also a carrier too, but he also holds the key to an antidote to the virus. And I think that's what it was, if I can remember. I'm not going to read the consensus for it or whatever, or read the plot for it. But, looking at the critic review for the movie, the consensus from Rotten Tomatoes is 72%, which is still pretty good. It's still pretty good, So the movie was very decently. And, of course, after the movie came out, everybody was talking about a possible third installment, which had been mapped out. And of course, this is all taking place since 2010. So now here it is, let's see, almost 20 years later. Almost 20 years later since 2007, we finally get 28 years later. No, it's not really 28 years, it's been almost 20 years. Well, you got to figure 28 Days Later came out in 2002. So, yeah, it's been 23 years. Okay, so it's 23 years since the events of 28 Days Later. And now you got this new one, which is now considered a post-apocalyptic coming-of-age horror film. Coming of age. Let that sink in. Coming of age. When you see the trailer for this movie, you get all hyped up. You do get all excited. They market the trailer as like, holy shit, this is going to be the movie. We've been waiting for this for so goddamn long. And it's finally coming out, and it looks like it's going to be more bloodier. It's going to be more rage infused. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. Well, even if you look at the critical response, okay. So now they say the critical response to this movie, consensus on Rotten Tomatoes, is 89%. So it's pretty much set up there along the lines of 28 Days Later. And I will read, we're going to Tarantino this review today. I'm going to read the critical response of this movie first, and then I'm going to give you my take on it. My take on it. I'm sorry, not having my take on it. So the website's consensus reads 28 years later, taps into contemporary anxieties with the ferocious urgency of someone infected with the rage virus, delivering a haunting and visceral thrill ride that defies expectation. Remember those words, okay? And then, of course, I'm going to read up on. I'm going to try to find something that's a little bit more less in tone to that. But it looks like, yeah, even Rotten Tomatoes lists it as one of the 100 best zombie movies out there. Okay, here you go. You got the Independent review, 3 out of 5 stars, describing it as a post-Brexit, COVID-conscious take on the world with ideas about nationalism, isolationism, and weaponized culture adding to the mix. But it's punchy and simple once again. So, that being said, let's go ahead and go into the plot a little bit. Now, mind you, there are going to be some spoilers here. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but if you don't want to hear what the plot is about, if you don't want it spoiled for you, turn the review off. Like I always say, go watch the film and come back. So, of course, there is a little side story to it. You know, it starts out the very first 5 minutes of the movie, and it takes place during 2002, which is an outbreak. And you see some flashbacks in this movie. It's very weird with the way this movie is pieced together. But one of the flashbacks is at the beginning during the rage virus outbreak. There's a little boy named Jimmy who ends up fleeing his house in the Scottish Highlands. So now it's not, this is like the other side. It's not the UK, not just the UK that's infected. You got Scotland or Scottish Isles that are also infected. So his family was being attacked, and he was being attacked by this his infected family, which then he takes shelter at the local church where he finds his dad, who is a priest, praying, believing that the outbreak is to be the day of judgment, and he interprets the virus as a harbinger of the end of times. He gives Jimmy a cross necklace and urges him to flee before allowing himself to be overtaken by the infected. And of course, little Jimmy, he ends up escaping and surviving, but you don't find out about him until much, 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 much later in the film. So it's like this character Jimmy is bookends for this film, and I will tell you why toward the end. So then comes 28 years after the second outbreak. Second outbreak, which would have been 28 weeks later, and the rage virus has already been eradicated from the continental Europe, while the British Isles remains an indefinite quarantine. So the British Isles are still under quarantine. Anybody goes in, they're stuck. You're fucked. Whatever. We follow a family, a scavenger named Jamie, his wife, who is very sick throughout the movie, and their young 12-year-old son named Spike. Now, mind you, this movie, for whatever reason, it does not follow a formula in a sense as the first two films do, but almost as like it takes a little bit from different sources when it comes to post-apocalyptic views. Now, in a typical zombie movie, you have a situation going on. You have the dead that are walking around. You can't kill them, or you can kill them. You don't know, but they're just doing their thing. You don't know why they're killing. They're just there. It's like dead people are coming up from the grave and killing amongst us. And then you got to figure a way of, okay, what am I going to do now? What am I supposed to do now? Everybody's dead. I'm left alive. Some people are left alive. And what do we got to do? And then you get into situations where you're with other people and problems ensue. You got to learn to get along with each other. You got to learn to tolerate each other. You got to learn to survive with each other, or end up killing each other, that kind of thing. So, yeah, in a typical movie like this, that is post-apocalyptic, there's no rules of the world. There's no laws, there's no policies, there's no rules. It's a free-for-all. Your best friend who you ain't seen in like 5 years could be up the street running a gang of bloodthirsty killers, and they're going to come after you. He don't give a shit if you're his old best friend or not. He's going to do what he can to survive and protect what's his, and what people that he's it's under his command. That kind of thing. It happens in a lot of these programs, a lot of these movies, if you take a look at The Walking Dead, okay, The Walking Dead pretty much started out as something like that, just a group of people trying to survive, zombie apocalypse, and then throughout the seasons, it just starts getting bigger and bigger. You start coming across more and more groups that become a threat to certain individuals, certain survivors, and it becomes rules of the land, and it was just one big horror drama show. Now, mind you, it's very good in a sense. It's very good. So it's like you take a show like The Walking Dead, where the zombies are the forefront of the show, and you go season to season to season, and the zombies are pretty much put on the back burner of the whole series, and they're just there. They're just an object. That's all they are. They're just an object that's there. It's there. You're used to it. It'll kill you. You're infected. Whatever. So now the show is all about human relations, how humans interact with each other, what they got to do to survive, what they got to do to help each other, help themselves. So it becomes one big drama, And like I said, you got the zombies that are on the back burner, that kind of thing. Well, that seems to be the way with this movie. You got the first two movies that are focused on this virus, the outbreak of the virus and such. A lot of things ensue, take place. So now here you are, 28 years later, 28 years after the outbreak. People are living in isolation. People are learning to get along, to help each other out, how to survive without electricity, living by candlelight, this and that. And then, of course, in this movie here, you have the scavenger, Jamie. He takes his son out into the world to teach him how to survive, how to kill these once humans, but now odd creatures. Takes him out into the world and shows him how to survive. And of course, the infected in this movie, it's almost like you got there. There's a lot of them that are infected, sort of like the way they were in the first two movies. But you got to figure over the years, whatever virus they were infected with, some of them made stronger. There's actually some of these creatures in this film that are called alphas, which are stronger and much more intelligent and harder to take down. So yeah, there's like different groups of infected that are around that they have to take out, or you just see them, running about, which is interesting to say the least. I mean, okay, they evolved. That makes it a little bit more terrifying, I guess, to people. But it's just something about it. And then you got a subplot to the story where, like I said, the mother who is dying or is very, very sick. And then once the scavenger and his son return back to the village after claiming some kills and such, he realizes that, okay, his dad has lied to him about there being a doctor out there who can possibly help his mom. And he's starting to have an affair with the local school teacher. So Spike, at his age, decides he's going to take his mom outside of the base and take her to find this doctor in the land. The doctor's played by Ralph Fiennes, of course. He has a very interesting role in there. He does play a pretty good part in there. So I will say, like, some of the acting in this movie is probably spot on. Especially with actors like Ralph Fiennes, who has been in movies like this for so long. But I will say, to say the least, without going too much more into the story, that's basically all this is. It's about a 12-year-old boy who's in this apocalyptic world, trying to help his mother, trying to help himself, trying to survive, and that's it. So I want to say there's not very much going on action, horror oriented or related when it comes to any raging beings. You do see a lot of raging beings come out, don't get me wrong, especially when a kid is trying to kill him with a bow and arrow, and of course it's like, oh, you got to hit him in the head or hit him in the heart. So they know how to kill these things off, and they use bow and arrows to do it. So it's not quite like Daryl Dixon. They got handmade bows and they had handmade arrows, and that's what they use to take them down. And he learns along the way how to use them and how to efficiently and effectively take down these raging zombies. And this whole entire story, the movie really evolves. It revolves around the story of this kid who's trying to help his mom, trying to save his mom, but in the end is unable to for a certain reason. And I feel like with this movie, when it comes to the plot, it borrows elements from other movies, especially video games as well. Even video games that have been adapted into TV shows, and you probably know what I'm talking about. Shows like The Last of Us, where it is post apocalyptic, but the forefront is a lot of drama that is going on, a lot of the story that is taking place. And that almost seems like how this movie has quite evolved into that pattern. So this movie, it is not like the original two. And don't get me wrong, sometimes change is good for a little bit. There's something a little original, but for old school fans of the movies that were wanting more of what was delivered to them, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed with this film, knowing that there is not a whole lot of suspense, there's not a whole lot of action. There was maybe one scene in the movie that may rip your attention on the edge of your seat, kind of. But other than that, there's really nothing too big or too suspenseful about it. However, it can be pretty eerily, visually visceral in certain areas, especially when you look at the poster and you see this Tower of Skulls, and you definitely learn about the Tower of Skulls later on in the film. I'm not going to spoil that for you, but it is pretty interesting in how it is pieced together and what its significant means. And I think this movie is just more story involved. It's story oriented. You don't see a whole lot of the infected, even though the first 5 minutes of the movie, it's like, oh my god. So the movie opens with these kids, a group of kids, 7 or 8 of them, all sitting in a room watching Teletubbies on TV while something's going on in the background. Mom brings in this young boy named Jimmy, sits him in there, tells him not to come out. Next thing you know, one of these rage-infecting zombies come breaking in, like 3 or 4 of them at a time, and they just devour these kids, even though it's all seen off screen. But you gotta imagine, like, how terrifying is that? Like, children are the biggest victims in movies like this, and you really feel for them because children, they're defenseless, they're very vulnerable, and you got a movie like this where you send an antagonist into a room and just devour kids within seconds, kill them off. It's like there's no fucks given whatsoever. So I gotta say that there is a couple intense moments in this film, but for the most part, it's all story driven. It's all story oriented with the characters. And if it's something that you're really into, like the story is interesting to me. Don't get me wrong, I was watching the whole movie. I was paying attention to the story. But I feel like for people that are expecting a big payoff toward the end, it's going to kind of be laughing a little bit. There is a couple things in the movie that really lighten the tone of the movie itself, but there's really nothing too much to lighten up, though. There's nothing too much to lighten up in tone, really, because the whole movie is pretty much dragged out in a dull sense. You're watching the movie, you're paying attention to it, but then you're like, okay, come on, where's these rage of infecting zombies at? Where's this rage? Even one of them gets stopped by a fucking blow dart. One of them gets stopped by a fucking blow dart that knocks them out. Like that's where we come to with a movie like this. It's like, you got a trailer that shows all this blood, all this gore, all this hyped up, action and suspense, and you get into the movie and you're like, where's it at? Where is it at? It's like, oh, it's played out in small scenes here, and there. But it's just mostly about this kid who's trying to get help for his mom. And then he goes back and he's like, you know what, I'm going to stay out here and just, try to be myself, and I'm not ready to come back, that kind of thing. So yeah, I want to say, like, personally, watching this movie, I did feel a little disappointed with, not really with the how the movie trailed out, but I will definitely say I was disappointed with how it ended and how quickly it ended when it was trying to be so much toward the end, but then it's trying to be like other movies where it tries to set something up for a sequel. And I think that's exactly what this movie is doing. And lo and behold, people, if you have not seen this movie yet, lo and behold, there is another 28 years later movie coming out called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. And this one is actually going to be directed by Nia DaCosta. I've never heard of her, but okay. Let me see what all she. Okay, she's only done a few short films. Oh my gosh, she's done the new Candyman. Oh Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's gonna be good. Yeah, huh. So she did the movie Little Woods. Never seen it. Candyman, which is the not a. It's like a soft reboot, but a sequel in a sense to the first one. I thought it was garbage. The Marvels, didn't see it. Heard it was bad. Don't know what Hedda is. Apparently, it's not out yet. And then, of course, you got the sequel to 28 Years Later, which is 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. And both these movies apparently were shot back to back with its predecessor 28 years later. And it's going to serve as the fourth installment in the 28 Days Later film series. Yeah, and you also got some characters that are reprising some roles from the previous movie. You got Alfie Williams, who plays Spike in this film. He replaces his role, especially the actor Aaron Taylor Johnson. I'm sorry, who plays Jamie in the movie, who is the father. And then you got some others that are playing, and of course, they did say when this movie was going to be in pre-production that Cillian Murphy, who was in 28 Days Later, is going to make an appearance. He's going to make an appearance in the sequel as Jim, a former bicycle carrier and survivor of the original outbreak, who is going to reprise his role from 28 Days Later. So if you are a little upset that Cillian Murphy was not in this film, like people thought he was going to be, like people said he was going to be, he's not going to be. He's not in this film, but he's going to be in the sequel that's shot back to back. He's going to be in The Bone Temple, which is set to release January 16th, 2026. And of course, the film was announced as part of a planned trilogy, and with Garland serving as the screenwriter for all three. In January 2025, Danny Boyle confirmed that he would direct the final film in the trilogy. So, yeah, this is going to be something. It's really going to be something. So, there's going to be at least two more films, I assume. You know, Bone Temple's going to be one. And then, of course, I don't know what's going to come after that. They will probably... they'll probably mix it up. They'll probably figure out what they're going to do. But, yeah, so this movie... This was actually given awards. This was actually has pending awards. It won some awards, the Golden Trailer Awards. It was nominated, and it's got pending awards for the Astra Mid-Season Movie Awards for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Supporting Actress, and such. However, to me, this movie, even though it does work in some areas, I feel like not a lot of people are going to enjoy this film. Not a lot of people are going to have the same thoughts as me or have the same thoughts as somebody who's like, oh my God, this movie was incredible. This is a movie for you to experience, to watch, and see exactly how you place it within yourself. Are you a fan of 28 Days Later or 28 Weeks Later? You might like this. Or you might be like me and say, it was alright. Or you might say it was a big steaming pile of goat shit. I don't know. You guys would have to make your decision on it. There's going to be people that like it. There's going to be people that hate it. I myself am pretty much in between with this movie. And I want to say, like, okay, it was a pretty good story. It was very story driven. And it was about this kid, he was trying to help his mom. Those are the dangers right there. His mom is very sick. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's doing at times. So yeah, that can be pretty scary. You're walking around in Scottish Isles, open land. Anything can happen. Any of them can pop out. Which I think that's another disappointing thing for me. When you look at the two previous films, you had hordes of these infected, raging zombies. You had hordes of them. Big ass groups coming at somebody. And this one, you have maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 of them at a time, and they're all spread out. And I'm like, well, what happened? Did they all die off and there's only like a few of them left here? Like, there's really nothing suspenseful about 28 years later. There's not a whole lot of suspense. There's not a whole lot to go on, except if you want a story-driven movie, in a post-apocalyptic time that anything can happen, so this could be your film. I'm going to give this movie a personal rating of mine. I'm going to give this movie a personal rating of 6.5 out of 10. 6.5 out of 10 for me. It's not going to be a 7 or 9 or whatever. I'm going to give it a 6.5 because it still has some kind of life in it, and I want to see where it evolves in the follow-up, in the sequel for it. But it's definitely not, I mean, it is canon to the first 2 films, but suspense-wise, you're not going to probably enjoy it. You probably will think of this as a big snore fest. I would hope not. I mean, I sat through it. I thought the story was pretty decent for what it was. It just doesn't have that suspense factor. It does not have what the first 2 movies had. So, on that note, guys, I'm going to end the review right here. What did you think about 28 years later, guys? Did you see it? Did you see this movie? What are your thoughts on it? What is your rating on it? Let me know down in the comments section. And to everybody else who watches the podcast, thank you for joining me today. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe button down below. Make sure you follow us on our Rumble channel. Links for everything are down below in the description section as well. Today's feature was 28 years later. I hope you guys enjoyed today's review. And I hope you guys either enjoyed the movie or you hated it. Let me know what you think about it. And until next time, guys, I'll catch you right back here at the cinema.